are now more people suffering from eating too much than from eating too little.
Have you ever wondered what happens when a billionaire donates to their very own foundation? Like, what happens to all that money? $1 billion is a lot, and these givings are encouraged with generous tax exemptions. I've asked myself all the time, why not donate to a charity doing the actual work on the ground directly? There is definitely no shortage of charities. There are even well-established programs by the United Nations that millions rely on, and you can donate to those as well. So why is there more foundations now than ever before? Well, if you believe that billionaire philanthropy is the most redeeming quality of the ultra-wealthy, I'm about to ruin your childhood. As I found in my investigation, and you too will see in my explanation, billionaire philanthropy is very far from the rosy picture portrayed in the feel-good stories by the media. Philanthropy is actually the best way how you can hoard your wealth indefinitely, pay no taxes, and get praised for it by everyone. I want to destroy this notion that billionaires give out their wealth and expect nothing in return. The super rich are known for being extremely efficient at avoiding as much taxes as humanly possible, and philanthropy is actually one of the most effective ways of hoarding wealth while reducing your tax burden to 1 to 2%. Much of it happens through a powerful institution known as foundation. Private foundation is an extremely privileged institution. They are tax-exempt private organizations, yet they are still allowed to invest into for-profit companies. Foundations can hold corporate stocks and bonds and generate revenue this way. There's only one major condition they have to fulfill to keep their tax-exempt status, and that is donate 5% of foundation's total assets on an annual basis. So when you hear a billionaire donating their wealth to a charity and it's going through a foundation, up to 95% of it can do nothing charitable at all. In 2021, Americans donated almost $500 billion into charities. 2/3 of this came from individuals. Only 18% came from foundations. But if all of the foundation's assets went to charity, they would have to donate all of the $1 trillion some 100,000 foundations hold in the United States. Instead, they donated only $90 billion in 2021. Billionaire philanthropy doesn't come for free. It comes with the benefit of legally dodging taxes by stockpiling their wealth in a tax-exempt institution. And it's the one thing billionaires consistently receive endless praise and gratitude for. I don't think many people realize that it is completely legal for foundations to generate revenue from for-profit investments. It is even uglier than it sounds if you zoom in on this scheme up close. You often see headlines about the enormous generosity of the Gates Foundation, but most of these articles won't mention that the Gates Foundation is actually two entities, the Foundation Trust and the actual charity. It is the trust that holds most of these assets and then contributes to the charity arm on an annual basis. The foundation has something called the Strategic Investment Fund, which is doing just that. Its investment portfolio includes global conglomerates such as Coca-Cola, Walmart, Berkshire Hathaway, UPS, or big pharma companies. Most of these investments have been criticized for conflicting with the foundation's charitable goals, but we'll get to that later. So next time you hear about a billionaire foundation, think of the 95% of assets they hold in profitable ventures. Yet even the 5% donation requirement is pretty sketchy. You'd think that's where the rules would be clear-cut and strict, only allowing donations to non-profit orgs. But you'd be wrong. In 2012, the Ford Foundation awarded a $1 million grant to the Los Angeles Times, a private, for-profit media company. The donation outraged critics that complained charities shouldn't give to for-profit organizations, but it fell flat because foundations have been doing this routinely and no one cares. In 2020, an excellent investigative report by The Nation found at least $250 million that was donated by the Gates Foundation went to companies where the foundation holds corporate stocks and bonds. A big portion of the foundation's assets came from Warren Buffett. Buffett's hedge fund, Berkshire Hathaway, has multi-billion-dollar investments in the same companies the Gates Foundation propped up with its charitable donations. But shouldn't it be illegal to make donations to a private entity that you stand to make profit from? Well, only if you're too obvious about it, of course. Pearson Charitable Foundation once had to pay a $7.7 million settlement for using its funds to generate revenue for Pearson Incorporated, the publishing corporation. The ruling said the law prohibits charities from benefiting their parent for-profit companies, but introduce a layer of separation by having your foundation donate to companies that just happen to be the same ones you hold corporate stocks and bonds in, and suddenly all is fine. The purpose of donating to for-profits is usually obfuscated with the sharing common goals excuse, but peel back the layer of bullshit and you'll see more clearly. When you break down these donations and investments individually, they seem minuscule compared to the revenue size of their companies. But the donations aren't meant to stack up their treasure chest with cash. They are meant to elevate the risk of corporations trying to expand into new markets. When a project fails, the company takes no liability, but if it succeeds, it reaps all the benefits of extra revenue generated from a market expansion. One such example is when the Gates Foundation donated $11 million to MasterCard to cement their presence in Kenya. This act of philanthropy was accused of helping a big corporation assume a dominant position in a risky market. And it is really hard to read into it anything other than propping up market expansion of a multinational. I want to flip the narrative on its head for a bit. When billionaires reduce their taxes by funneling their wealth into a foundation, let's call it out for what it is: a government subsidy. Tax exemption is a foregone revenue that could have been used to better fund public programs. Instead, the uncollected taxes go to support whatever ventures billionaires decide on a whim. This is a complete circle of perverse incentives. In my previous video on Bill Gates' influence on US education policy, I showcased how billionaire philanthropy heavily subsidized and pushed through flawed educational standards into US public schools. Throughout his efforts, Gates was donating millions into various software and publishing companies to ease their entrance into the market for new educational materials. The companies went on to book billions in revenue and substantial boosts to their profits. All of that off the backs of the American taxpayers, who had to subsidize public schools purchasing the trademarked and copyrighted materials sold by these companies. The Gateses, to this day, refuse to admit they have an outsized influence on public spending.
Our advocacy money is a rounding error. Okay, K-12 education is 600 billion years of money a year that is spent.
Let me break this down to you, Bill. Federal state budgets were following your advocacy, not vice versa. Your rounding error billions of dollars of advocacy money influence how trillions of taxpayers' money have been spent. That's the issue, Bill. Foundations are extremely powerful institutions, not just due to their wealth and assets. It is also thanks to the lax transparency rules and zero accountability. It is very difficult to find real tangible information about foundation finances or inner workings. 90% of foundations don't even have a website, and many of those that do function just as front-page promotional materials, nothing else. The worst example I found is the Musk Foundation website. It doesn't tell you anything and all its text could fit inside a tweet. Due to these lax and vague rules, foundations enjoy a position of tremendous privilege. Unlike any other private or public institution, foundations are beholden to nobody. They are undemocratic because obviously there is no electorate to hold them accountable to. But they are even worse than corporations because they don't have to answer to market mechanisms either. Foundations have no bottom line, no shareholders, no competitors, no customers, and they're not required to submit quarterly or annual reports. And by default, billionaire foundations are perpetual, locking up their wealth behind the 5% rule indefinitely. By now, I have dunked on charitable giving so much that it feels like beating a dead horse at this point. But I'm still seeing some twitching, so let's double tap just to be sure. It is very easy to be impressed with all the billions that get poured into charities. But how much of that money actually reaches those most in need is a question of a long-standing debate. Even so, looking at the available statistics paints a pretty pessimistic picture. According to Giving USA, up to 45% of all charitable donations go towards religion and arts. Giving to health programs and overseas is tiny by comparison. So helping the global poor is a really minor concern to the world's richest. Now subtract from those raw numbers all the administrative costs and obscene salaries paid to senior management, and even less is left for those in most dire need. So if we leave it to the rich to decide where to help, 95% of their philanthropy is going to be just a perpetual investment trust, and half of the remaining 5% is going to do fuck all. We could have been taxing them like the rest of the population and fund programs based on need rather than whims and passions of individuals, but let's not get some crazy ideas out there. Charity is a group of the ultra-wealthy searching for answers with their right hand to problems that others in the room have created with their left. This isn't a quote from Slavoj Žižek.
Where are the Marxists?
It's from Peter Buffett, the son of Warren Buffett, saying the quiet part out loud. Billionaires are responsible for the problems they promise to solve with philanthropy. This is a notion that no big philanthropy is willing to admit. But what does the reality say? In 2007, the LA Times published a series of investigations into controversial investments of the Gates Foundation. They exposed investments that conflicted with its charitable causes. For instance, it revealed investments of about $423 million in big oil companies operating in Africa. Not a big deal, until you get to the part where these companies have been responsible for pollution around their operation in African regions, causing significant spikes in cancer and respiratory diseases. That's almost twice as much as the foundation donated to polio and measles immunization and research worldwide. That wasn't an outlier. That was part of 41% of the foundation's total assets that have been invested in companies that countered its charitable goals. It included investments in companies using child labor or big pharma companies pricing their medicine beyond the reach of patients in need. This controversial investment strategy continues to this day, either through the Strategic Investment Fund or through Berkshire Hathaway Holdings. Whether it's hedge funds, venture capitalist firms, or foundations, billionaires are building up their wealth in investments in multinational corporations, exploiting workers and resources from developing countries. They don't invest into worker co-ops or unionization advocacy groups or farmers' communes. It's big oil, big pharma, big agro, big tech. Billionaires are talking big on climate change and the environment.
This is part of the Bezos Earth Fund's $10 billion commitment to fight climate change.
Yet they are polluting 1,000,000 times more than an average person in the bottom 90%. And the majority of that pollution is coming from their investments. Billionaires are talking big on poverty and inequality. Yet all of the world billionaires, some 2,000 people, have more wealth than the bottom 4.6 billion. The top 1% have doubled the wealth of the bottom 6.9 billion people. The more this wealth gap between the ultra-rich and everyone else widens, the more blame they carry on their shoulders for the misery caused by the system that allows for this. If philanthropy is truly about helping others, why do we allow billionaires to hoard their wealth indefinitely in perpetual foundations that wouldn't dissolve even after their founders' deaths? Why is up to 95% of their wealth allowed to be reinvested into for-profit ventures? Why are donations allowed to go to for-profit companies? Philanthropy is not about solving problems so that people don't live in misery. It's an investment strategy with long-term ROI expectations. Thank you very much for listening to this. Since I have no ROI expectations at all and I have no sponsors, I would very much appreciate if you donated to my Patreon to support my work. Thank you.